Hi, my name is Rob Lilly and I'm the director of Lilly Inspired Training, and we are working with wickets today. And instead of wickets for right now, we're using cones. The reason I use cones is because I want our brain to have to analyze going over one cone on one side of the body and then the other cone on the other side of the body continuously to create bilateral motion or bilateral movement. One of the things we look at with cones too, you want your foot to go up and over the cone. So I'm going to show you this just for a moment. As I'm running through these cones, I'm going to try and get my foot to go up and over where the bottom part of my foot clears the cone. So when I go down to the ground, I'm dragging my foot back to grab the ground. What we know about athletics and running is that if I bring my leg up and I basically go through a cyclical motion and I come back to the ground and my hips go forward, I'm going to have the most power to create a push-off mechanism for running. These cones are going to represent basically cadence for us initially, and then we're going to separate them apart a little bit to represent both cadence and extension or a longer stride. You'll notice when Annie and Bobby do these exercises, they're never overstriding, so you won't see them land on their heel or elongate their knee, basically to where they're overextending their knee. So that's what we're going to work on for the next couple minutes. I'll talk it through as we go. Our last thing I'll say is, when we want to use our glute with more intensity, the best way to create that action is to get our hip flexor muscles to engage. So we're going to drive our knee up using our hip flexors, and as a byproduct, we'll load our glute with firepower, and then we'll come down into the ground to use our glute and our hamstring as our mechanism to create power. So that's what we're going to work on. Andy and Bobby are going to do some of these movements now. So this is Annie and Bobby. They're going to go up and over the cones. You're going to see them do that. Annie had to skip the last one because she got going so fast, which we'll talk about in a moment. Good. So the cones are all 2.5 steps apart. We don't measure the cones necessarily because we're at the track. Annie started with a huge stride initially. This is a high knee exercise more than it is a push-off exercise. So this is Annie. She's going back over the cones again. And what we want to notice is Annie really likes to go longer strides, but we're working on cadence. And so creating cadence is really opportunistic for us. Each leg goes over each of the cones independently. Very good. Watch Annie and Bobby from the back. So she's going to go up and over. You can hear their cadence get faster at the end, because we're creating momentum. So we start in a particular cadence and it gets higher because we're creating momentum. Last one, change it. The other thing we want to look at is their knee cycle and hip cycle. Everything looks like it's going through circles. And as they land right now, they're landing a little bit more on their toe than on their, certainly more than on their flat foot or on their heel. Great job, Annie. Great job, Bobby. So now we've spread out a few of the cones. So Annie and Bobby, the first 5 cones are all the same distance apart. So where we started this entire drill. And then after the 5th cone, we've now extended out one more footstep for all of the next like 7 or 8. We're doing this because we create this high cadence at the beginning of our routine. And with that high cadence, we're basically generating glute power and hamstring power. After the first 5 cones, we get to put some of that glute power and hamstring power into action, and we're able to travel over the cones with the same cadence with higher power. So even though the cones are further apart, it shouldn't sound any different. The cadence shouldn't change. So here we go with Annie. Yep, so we're allowing Annie to stride out. And as we create those strides at the end, the last 3 cones are 4 to 5 steps apart. So they're even further apart because we're creating so much momentum that Annie and Bobby were basically kicking the cones at the end. So we create with high cadence, generates power, and then we utilize that power as we push through. You'll notice every time these guys land, they land with their feet flattish to the ground. There's no heel kicking, and there's certainly no landing on their knees. Good job. So we'll watch it. I'm gonna put the camera on the front side. We'll watch Annie. So right leg goes over the right side cones, left leg will go over the left side cones. And she just drives through. Good, same thing with Bobby. Nobody swings around the cones, they go straight over. Good. Okay, we're back at it. So we've moved the cones now further apart from the beginning all the way to the end. The first 5 are 3 Rob steps apart. That's my feet length. Then 4 steps and then 5 steps at the end. We now have a cadence that we've created through this rhythm drill with the cones close. Then we've moved them apart a little bit. Now we're just gonna run over them and create a longer stride. But you'll notice we don't overstride, so we never land. Can one of you guys just show where you'd land if you overstride in this position? Yep, we never land like that. So when Annie comes through, she's gonna land in a cyclical motion where she drives. Yep, Bobby's doing the same thing. So he's gonna bring heel towards butt, leg through, and then land. Good. Okay, here we go, when you guys are ready. Good, full power, full purpose. Good, that was excellent. We'll do it again. You're fine, just take it easy on the way back. Because we have these so far apart, people always say, man, they seem really far, but when I'm videotaping this end, we videotaped the last end. As Annie comes through, you're just gonna see her form just is perfect, and she's creating consistencies through her form on this longer end. Still doesn't land on her heel at all, going through, good form and good power. Good. So we're just trying to get ourselves into a position where we can create high cadence and then the correct distance per stride for each athlete. We use cones to do so. You can use wickets. There's a lot of tools and tricks. At the end of the day, our goal is to make sure our athletes create cadence initially, which gets our hip flexors, our abs, our kind of core engaged. And then over time, we're going to increase the distance of the cones in order to create a larger hip engagement, which creates then a larger glute engagement. So there's more power coming from our glute and hamstring as we land and grab the ground and as we push off. That's our goal of doing these exercises. Thank you for joining us at the track today.